The Fire Tattva in yoga, the significance of fire, it is incalculable. For yogis, what fire means, first of all, that's because the actual physical fire, the actual manifest fire, the fire that we experience, that the flames that we experience, of all the tattvas, they are the closest in reality to the energy vibration of the fire tattva, what is called Agni. No, so that is why fire is so. Of all the earth vibration is difficult to access. The water vibration, the experience of water or liquids is not exactly the same as the tattva experience, though of course it's very similar. Fire is the closest. In actual experience, it is the closest to the reality of the tattva. So by working with fire, we train ourselves to recognize the energetic signature of the tattva, and then we can take that into the air tattva, the water tattva, the earth tattva, things like that. But fire has always been very central to the yogic worldview. You know, the very first word, very first word in the Rig Veda is Agni. The most sacred scriptures of India, they begin with the word Agni. You know, and Agni is described in the Rig Veda, and all the Vedas actually, is always described as Sada aggressor, always ahead. Agni is the forerunner. Agni Hayavadana also. Agni is the via media between the human dimension, the human loka, the human consciousness, and the divine consciousness or the Divya Loka. Agni is the thread of communication. Agni is a thread. So, in literal terms, Agni is supposed to carry the offerings and the prayers. We make offerings into the Havan Kund, the Yagna Kund, and that goes up to the Devas. But that is a symbolic or a literary way, or a metaphorical way of communicating that the access to the higher consciousness, the access to the force is through Agni. So, Agni that way is the conscious active principle of Shiva, which is why if you look at Shiva, a lot of the stories are about blazing fire pouring out of him, especially the Kamadahana, you know, the one where he destroys Kamadeva with his third eye. So from the Rig Vedic times, which is close to 6,000 years back, the centrality of fire, the centrality of Agni in the culture has been very important. And which is why one thing we gave up, you know, India keeps changing its spiritual practices and conditionings according to evolving circumstances, but the one thing we never gave up was the Havan, the Yagna, the fire sacrifice, working with the fire. You know, and the aghoras and the wandering sadhus and, you know, the Nathpanthis, they all work with fire. You know, they all have that. The Nathpanthis even carry those fire tongs. They even carry those fire tongs as part of the. Because there is something deeper with that. When you are at a certain level of yogic vibration, the fire acts like a Skype of the day. they would actually communicate to each other through the fire, because they know it's evening, the person will make a fire, and whoever needs to be communicated to the other person, they would communicate through the fire. Yeah, and I'm not making this up, they know how to do it. And mankind has always been fascinated. It's very hypnotic looking at flames. It's very hypnotic, because there is a certain alteration of the environment. There is a certain alteration of the vibrations of the environment that only fire can do. Which is why when you want to, the best stories are always told around the campfire. Yeah, when the flames are up, and people are very suggestible. Of course, the Nazis understood that, so they had these gigantic torchlight parades where they would hold this, because they understood that people become very suggestible. But in genuine terms, what the fire does is that it increases the akashic vibration, it increases the space tattva in an environment, which is why the first thing you should do when you get up is immediately light a diya. The first thing that you do in the morning is to engage with the fire, and by engaging with the fire to increase that, the akashic tattva in one's environment. It's a very, very powerful thing. And then of course all the sadhana we do, our 8 spiritual breaths, so we talk of nothing else. Fire, light, fire, light, fire, light, fire, light. All the time we are talking about that. Because this correlation is very clearly understood in the yogic tradition, that if you work with fire, you directly jump into the spiritual dimension, which is the akashic dimension. That, which is why in all the temples, all the ancient functioning temples, there is a unique smell that comes because they've been doing so many havans, and that has accumulated and gone into the walls, that and the use of diyas all the time, the use of the lamp. So this notion of having a fire burning, or the notion of having a flame, a live flame at all the time, has always been, it's been like the really, really, really ancient aspect. So now there is a ritualistic way to do that, and there is a yogic way to do that. Now if you are in deep sadhana, the minute you activate a flame, you can feel a certain shift in consciousness. The minute you do that, the minute you light the flame in front of your, whoever is your Ishtadevta, or in your secret space, or in front of the Guru, there is a whole, and significant days you do a havan for that reason, because again the flames and all the havan samagri and the way the flames leap up, they create a certain shift in the vibration. Now that doesn't last. In the Arya Samaj, it is compulsory. Yes, you need to do a havan in the morning, havan in the evening, mini havan they do. It's compulsory. All the Arya Samaj schools begin with a havan. That's actually a damn good practice. It's actually a tremendously good practice. If you could do that, if you could do, and the people who used to specialize in that were called the Agnihotris, जो अग्निहोत्रम में speciality रखते थे. And there's been quite some fascinating research done where in Maharashtra, in fact, they've experimented with this, where they keep doing this Agnihotram, and they take the residue of the havan and they use that as fertilizer, and the yields have proved to be extraordinary. So it just creates like a whole difference. And what the person who is doing that, he spent his whole life, he's just going around from village to village convincing people to do the Agnihotram and then spread it. Like, not because it acts as fertilizer, because it shifts the vibration and it shifts the energy, and I can well believe that. So doing a havan on a regular basis is therefore very important. And it's not even very difficult to do. The mantras are not difficult, the process is not difficult. It needn't be 3 hour, 5 hour elaborate stuff. You can do it in 20 minutes also. It's not really something that is so difficult to do. That is still an external thing. You see, the point of sadhana is to activate the internal fire. Now, those who are in the 8 spiritual breaths know that very clearly, because from breath number 6 onwards, now I feel great heat at the base of the spine, and they up and out, At a very deep level, therefore, the fire is life. Now this is a literal truth, it is not a symbolic truth. Why is that? Because the sun is essentially a huge ball of fire and all life is dependent on the sun. All life on earth happens because plants work with sunlight, photosynthesis, then other beings eat the plants or they eat the beings that eat the plants. So at a very literal level, all life is dependent on sunlight. Food is basically processed sunlight, and yogis trace that back. They trace that whole process back, and some of them have actually found a way to shortcut it, that without actually using the food, they convert themselves into plants and they just keep directly pulling it from the sunlight. That person Nityananda is teaching his people how to do it, how to live without food. And it keeps happening, it spontaneously activates in people. So the sunlight is a very watered down version of that active principle of life, which is the fire. So the yogis just go straight to that fire, and they figured out that we can make a sun of ourselves. We can activate an internal sun, we can activate an internal fire. Now, I'm not getting into all the complicated, there are 5 kinds of fires, there is a digestive fire, there is a this fire, I'm not getting into all that. All that should be done only in sadhana. But they figured out that if you do pranayama, if you do certain kinds of mantra, if you do certain kind of rituals, you do certain kind of asanas, you do certain kinds of meditations, then the internal fire activates, which then got classified as the Mahashakti Kundalini, because it's just the way that Mahashakti Kundalini is the source of life. It is how the body experiences the fire, that's all it. And yes, it is true, it usually that fiery element activates from the base of the spine, though the point where the fire resides is the Manipuraka, it is the navel and the area around the navel. That's the fire energy. So this lighting of diya, doing yagna, doing all these kind of mantras, doing all this kind of pranayama is fundamentally to get to that state of Agni, is fundamentally to get to that activation of the Agni. And the mantras of Agni are so phenomenal. It is perhaps good that the knowledge of those mantras are now very limited and restricted, because they trigger off very badly in people. The Vedic mantras, the Rig Vedic mantras connected to Agni, they are coming from a different level of consciousness, and if you don't know what is going on, because just the vibratory potential of those mantras are too powerful, that Agni Sada Aggressor, it just doesn't mean that Agni, I hear idiotic interpretations like they would use the fire to clean the forest and then they could grow crops. The fire would lead because they would use. Now, if you know what Agni Sada Aggressor means, in vibrational terms, what that means, Agni Sada Aggressor, Agni always ahead. If you would know what they mean when they say that Agni is the eye of Shiva, there's a lot of transformatory potential hidden in those words, hidden in those syllables, which most people cannot decode because they don't have that level of intensity of vibration, and you cannot learn it intellectually. The thing about the Vedic mantras is you cannot look at the mantras and decode it. You have to vibrate at that similar level of intensity, and then that inner meaning unfolds. Now, when I first read about this in Sri Aurobindo, I was like, okay, it was an interesting perspective, it didn't matter to me until my own energy came to the spot where when I would pick up a Vedic mantra, suddenly I would see like it just descends at a level of consciousness and ascends at a level of consciousness that would just stun you. You just pick up one, and it only the Vedic mantras. It not even the Upanishadic mantras or not even the Upanishadic. They don't have that, and it's just a matter of the similarity of vibration. It's unfortunate today that people have forgotten. Those who do the havans, they don't do the yoga, they don't do the sadhana, they don't do the internal process. Only the Nathpanthis and the Aghoris do both. They do the internal and the havan, because very often the havans, they become like temple rituals, or they become ritualistic things, for a particular purpose. And till you yourself become a Havan Kund, you yourself become a Yagna Shala, that is what they say. You yourself become the the stage of Yagna. And so after that, whatever you put into yourself is cremated instantly. You yourself become a Yagna Shala. You have to use that external aid, because the physicality of the fire is helpful. Like I said, the fire is the closest in the material world. The fire is the closest thing to the actual tattva vibration. It is still not the real tattva vibration of Agni, but it is the closest. It comes the closest. So it helps, and it shakes you loose from that limitation of mistaking the embodied aspect of something for the tattva aspect. The embodied aspect of earth is not earth. No doubt the body is earth, but it is not the body, or solid things are not, or even something like cloth. Cloth is solid, but we don't consider it, because we don't consider a soft thing to be solid. A solid thing has to be hard. It has to be chunky. It has to be dense. We don't consider cloth to be solid, but cloth is also solid. Now, so that sense of, when we think of a tattva, we come to that tattva with all these preconceived notions and all these limitations and all these perceptual and prejudicial notions. Now, this example of cloth being a solid, we don't look at it that way. A rock is regarded as solid, but even powder is solid, and it's exceedingly soft. So the vibrational aspect of a tattva is what yogis are going for and what you're going for in spirituality. And as long as you committed with these limitational things, so by engaging with the fire, you learn to leave all those limitations, you learn to leave all those parameters out and go straight to the core. You go straight to the thing as it is, as the philosophers say, the essence. Now, there are certain places where the fire vibration is very intense. Volcanoes are very obvious places. There are certain sacred places where the fire vibration is very intense. In India, of course, the most intense place is Arunachala, the mountain, the sacred hill of Arunachala. Because according to the mythological stories, that is where Shiva appeared as the cosmic pillar of fire. But it's not just that. The tattva there is very clearly fire, and the temple there, the Arunachaleshwar temple there, the lingam is the fire tattva lingam. And those who have come know the kind of intense radiating heat that comes off. And it doesn't come off because they've got lamps in there or it's poor ventilation. No, it just radiates. The even funnier example of the fire tattva is in one of the Murugan temples, the Skanda temple. That is Skanda, Tiruchendur, on the way to Srikalahasti, where the top the inner room is actually air conditioned, and it is air conditioned because the heat that comes off the Murugan Murti is so powerful. Yeah, it's Tiruchendur. I think it's on the way. It's on the way to Sri Kalahasti, and it's very close to Tirupati also. It's mind-boggling, and it's nothing. It's very nondescript. The temple is nondescript. They in British times they created a new festival because they saw these Goras, they were celebrating New Year. So now every year on December 31st, 365 steps, one for each day of the year, they light it up with diyas. it's like a, it's like a new festival that has suddenly come up. But again, whoever were the pujaris or whatever, they didn't oppose it because they realized that this is only enhancing the basic power of the place, because it's the fire tattva. And South Indian temples, they know how to light it up. The whole temple looks like it's on fire, because they have this whole parikrama with wooden slats, and they put the oil lamps, and they have these things to light it up, ignite it. About 30 lamps can be lit simultaneously. So that notion of working with fire is very, very deep in South Indian temples. They have that basic sense, because that the minute you illuminate with fire, the Agni vibration of course becomes strong, but immediately the Akashic vibration increases. The Akashic level in the environment goes up. So everybody feels that difference. But it's really interesting, that Murugan temple, because that is the only temple there are 6 famous Murugan temples, just like there are 5 Tattva Shuddhi lingams, there are 6 lingams, there are 6 Murugan temples, 5 are on a hill, 1 is by the sea. And this is the only temple where he has both the Shaktis, left and right. Others in the other temples, one he is a child, so no Shakti, one is on the left, one is on the right, one is like a bachelor, things like that. This is the only place he has them on both sides, and people apparently used to faint away because of the sheer heat coming from that, and because of that fire tattva vibration. So going to the temple at Tiruvannamalai is of course recommended, because the kind of karmic burn that the fire tattva lingam can do for you is unprecedented. It can just burn through your limitations. It can burn through. I keep saying that 5 seconds in front of those Shivlingams is equivalent to 2-3 decades of normal sadhana, because they have been activated and created by yogis of such ability and such levels. But even more powerful than the Agnilingam temple is the hill of Arunachala itself, because that is Dakshinamurti himself. And doing the Girivalam, doing the Pradakshina is, I used to talk enthusiastically about it. Now I keep quiet, because what is there to say? You just do it. The kind of instant transformation of consciousness that happens, the kind of breakthroughs that a person achieves. I've really come to the space where I find that speaking on these things is becoming absurd. But the sheer power and the sheer speed of transformation is because of that. Because fire is the fastest, in terms of how you can move. Within the tattvas also, the fire is the fastest. And you can see, if you're burning paper or something, how fast the flame spreads. And if you've seen a fire, you know how fast the flame spreads. Now, it might not suit everybody. You see, it certainly benefits everybody. But if you are too much earth in you or too much water in you, if you are too physically inclined or you are too emotionally inclined, then the fire path might not suit you. Now, even though I am Aquarius and therefore air sign, basically I am a fire. The nature is fiery, though of course air is compatible with fire. That is the only problem, that sometimes the nature of the tattva, the nature of the path, because most of the yogic paths end up working with fire in the end. Not the bhakti yoga marg, but all the other margas, they end up working with fire, because fire burns, and the whole point is to get rid of the karma. The whole point is to burn through the karma and come to the natural state of being, which is enlightenment. And fire is the quickest and smartest, easiest way to do it. So the fire burns, and that, the going to the temple where they understand these things, where the place is energized, every time you visit you do drop enormous amounts. It's better, of course, in the end, that instead of relying on any external thing, that you activate the fire internally. And in our parampara, in our sadhana, in our process, it is very clear that the fire is activated internally. We draw the light and the fire from outside, and we activate it internally, so that we become the Yagna sthala, we become the kshetra, we become the place where the fire is burning internally. Now, because fire is regarded as something destructive, that you fire people, yes. There is a whole element of, but no, fire is regarded as a creative principle. All creativity, all originality, all breakthroughs, all insight flows from Agni. The aspect of creativity, the aspect of genuine breakthrough, there is a difference between reworking things and being novel. A lot of people confuse novelty with originality. You can rearrange things so that it gives a new kind of tingly sensation or a new kind of entertaining sensation, and many people mistake that for being genuine creativity or genuine originality. But that's not, that still comes from the water tattva vibration. That's still a working with emotion, because it's just working. A genuinely original breakthrough is a difficult business, and for that you need the fire. You need, because Agni sada aggressor, always ahead. And which is why pioneers usually don't get any bhav, because they are always ahead of the game. People don't understand what they're doing. Poor old Van Gogh is the best example. you know, or even the whole impressionist poor guys. The way they were completely rejected by their time. So the creative aspect of life, or the original aspect of life, whatever is non-habitual, whatever is genuinely authentic, that is Agni. Now, if we do a process like our process, because it is so Kundalini driven, it is so Pranayama driven, it is inevitable that intensity develops. The person becomes prachand. And then feedback also comes, that you are now becoming very less tolerant now, you are doing this, you are doing that, you become very snappish, those kind of. But that is, the fire element is now coming up. No? The more the fire element surfaces, the more and more you become authentic, the more and more you become straightforward, because fire goes direct straight line. Because it activates, it is Jagrit, it is the power behind activation also. Whenever a person is activated, whenever a person comes into a different state of consciousness, no matter for how small a time, that is the quality of Agni, that is the quality of Jagran. Which is why very often when we lose our temper, because at that moment we are more intense, we are feeling things more intensely, we have a sort of clarity in our thoughts and words and actions when we lose our temper that we wouldn't have in other times. So Blake, the great artist and poet Blake, very correctly said, the tigers of wrath are wiser than the horses of instruction. Proverbs from the marriage of heaven and hell, because he understood that. He understood that aspect of intensity, prachandata, that fire gives. That the vibrational shift happens. Thing is, without the nasty social consciousness consequences of losing your temper, can you bring yourself to that level of vibration mentally, emotionally, physically? Can you change that level of vibration so that you do function at that enhanced level or at that intense level without being a bad tempered person, or without just massacring people around you? That's the whole point of working with Agni. What we do in the 8 spiritual breaths, I always say, is controlled detonation. We just explode. That's why it takes 8 weeks, because each week is an explosion. Each week the new breath, the new whatever is an explosion, and it shakes loose certain limitations, it shakes loose certain restrictions, certain mental concepts, it moves to the other. So it's a series of controlled detonations over 2 months. It's a series of Agni in a very careful. Now, I got activated and it was literally Agni. I was literally burning up. The internal heat was so bad that I would sit against something, I would put my arm against something, I would raise it, and there would be the whole outline in ash, because my skin flake was flaking off. Or I would get up from the bed and there would be the whole outline of the body like that, in the dead cells, in the scorched cells. I would sweat until I would be sitting in a pool of sweat when I was doing my meditation, and then the heat from the body would be so intense that the sweat would dry up. So it's not recommended that you have an uncontrolled runaway Agni like that, because then normally that's when people stop sadhana, they go insane, things like that. But there are processes, which is why all these things are to be learnt under monitoring, under guidance, under mentors. There are processes, and the whole relationship with Agni, because Agni, very clearly it is understood that Agni is the friend of man. Agni is the friend of the human beings. Agni always prefers. It is a vibration of consciousness which is there for all of us, for us to evolve and transform, to come to that higher level of consciousness. Now it's a pity that we no longer directly worship Agni, we no longer can directly access that vibration, and we have to do it in these symbolic ways or side ways, or go to Arunachala or go to. But the Agni is there. The Agni is. And when you're doing a havan, it's quite strange sometimes, that the fire doesn't burn. You might by mistake, your hand might go into it, and at that time it doesn't burn you. Quite apart from all the other things that when you put in things that you want to release from your life, it comes jumping right out. So yogis, especially the wandering yogis, the people who go away and build a new fire each night, they very soon develop a relationship with it, and they understand, good Lord, this is something unbelievable. They very soon start understanding, and that is why the fire is also regarded as one of the earliest gurus. The fire is the initiator, the fire is and in all significant events in the Indian culture, somebody is born, somebody getting married, somebody died, whatever, in all the significant events we have fire. Because that fire is the witness also. That is what, even when you get, it is a sakshi. So even that sakshi bhava, even the witness consciousness is an aspect of the fire tattva. The fire is that witness for the gods. Whenever something is happening, the higher consciousness observes through the witness of the fire. Now, I'm not saying don't do the rituals, don't do the havan, because all those helps. I'm not saying don't do the diya in the morning. I think that's a brilliant discipline. Get up, light diya. It really, really makes a difference. And certainly one must go to the Tattva Shuddhi places or wherever you find that kind of, In fact, the Narasimha aspect of Vishnu is purely a fire element, and most of the Narasimha temples used to be built on the mouth of volcanoes. You don't get more literal than that. Same reason, because it can just tear through all those limitations. So they are directly working with that element, But since they are Vaishnavas, they wanted something in their comfort zone. They didn't want to work with the Agni directly or with the Shaivite version. Fine, whatever works for you. The thing is, when our path, the 8 spiritual breaths, is a path of fire and light. Very, very explicitly it is said that you are working with fire, you are working with light. So, there's no need for any symbolism, or there's no need for any difficulty in the matter. Which is the reason why it impacts people so strongly. Because no doubt it engages all the tattvas. If you look at our affirmations and if you look at the way it is done, all earth, water, fire, air, akasha, all are engaged with, but the primary methodology or the primary active principle is the fire principle. What we are using, what we are engaging, the material that we are using is the fire principle, Agni. That is why it gets these results. That is why it gets these dramatic results. Now, if you are using sound, for instance, unless you are using the correct kind of vibration, you won't be activating you'll activate the air principle, you'll activate the earth principle, you'll activate the water principle. It's very difficult to activate the fire principle with sound, unless you are using absolutely the correct bijas or absolutely the correct. So, now these are all technical matters, you see, and people expect that all processes will have the same impact. Not at all. All processes will have different impacts depending on the person, depending on how the person is doing, what is the, there are so many correlating factors, but fire just basically, and the fact that we never gave up, even though we gave up the Vedas because basically the people could not engage, there were not enough people at a level of vibration to understand the Vedic verses in their true import. But we never gave up the Havan, we never gave up the Yagna. And even today in Kerala there is one group of families which do the old authentic Vedic sacrifice. They come there and it goes on for a week, and at the end they set fire to all the buildings, all the temporary buildings that were created. That's the culmination of the Yagna. They say there's a YouTube video also. So that it's not gone, that knowledge is not gone, but that again is an external sort of way of an internal process, and you can do that yourself. Once you understand the Agni, once you understand the fire tattva, every day you can set yourself on fire. Which is why in one of the Upanishads, I think Isha Upanishad, it is very clearly said that he who sets himself on fire only knows Shiva. He who has activated the Agni thing only knows the Shiva, the one without the second. That the touch of fire is what transforms. It's very clearly again and again in yoga they say, which doesn't mean that you start scorching and burning yourself, it just means you need to activate that Agni, you need to activate the Mahashakti Kundalini from within. And when that happens, that transforms. It's not like you cannot transform with the others. We do Akashic process, we do earthly process, we do emotional process, but maximum value is derived from working with Agni. So that is why the preponderance, the prescriptions end up either consciously or unconsciously activating the Agni principle. Now we don't need to unconsciously do anything because it is our entire path. Our entire path is fire. Our entire path is light. Our entire path is basically driven by Agni. And so there are, see, this is all I am explaining in terms to the extent that without deep monitoring one cannot go deeper into these things. I am giving the bird's eye view of what is Agni, because how it actually plays out in people, what kind of impact it will have, what kind of consequence it will have, all those depend on vasana samskaras, all those depend on what one is doing. You cannot give a blanket prescription for this is how Agni will play out. But yeah, this is what Agni does. This is what Agni is. And those who grasp it, man, they have fun. Because it's so creative, there is a whole, your sadhana or your entire personal transformation becomes a creative process. It is not a tedious process, it is a very joyful process, it is a very fun process. It becomes a very authentic and original process, and there's a lot of fun with that. There's a lot of joy with that, that working with the Agni Tattva has that unexpected blessing, which most people don't realize, because the minute you say fire, and of course it has certain physical consequences if once the fire activates, once the Kundalini activates, yes, there are some physical discomforts, there are some physical, but all those are easily managed. Why for some small physical discomfort would you give up so much value? Aurobindo used to say people value comfort above the truth. He was correct. So yeah, that's that, and I've discovered this also. All yogis end up saying in the end, Agni is my friend, because they realize what it can do for you. They realize how much it can help you, and they find that the flames, whether internal or external, there is a personal relationship with the flames, and that is why they say Agni is my friend. Now, Swami Rama used to have deepest level of connection with that. He also has said it many times, Agni is my friend. But it's literally true, I think. It's literally true that Agni is your friend. And he has been. For 6,000 years he has been. He has been the driving force behind yoga. He has been the driving force behind personal transformation. Yes? Sarvam Shomyam.